And now following closely after the elf, we get the gnome. Possibly the smallest of all the races in D&D. Now, of course, we will begin with 5th edition again. Let us look at these traits, though, for our gnome. Now, the gnome is probably the one race that is most significantly different between these two races. So let us look here. We have an ability score increase. They get a +2 to their intelligence. Their intelligence goes up by 2 points. Age, again, mature at the same rate as humans and are expected, they're considered adults around 40. And they can live up to 350 to 500 years. So they're a little older than dwarves, but they are considered adult a little younger. It's odd. Alignment, often good. Size, they are between 3 and 4 feet tall, making them small. And their speed is 25 feet. They also have dark vision, just like the dwarves and elves. Then they have this gnome cunning. And this is they get advantage on intelligence, wisdom, and charisma saving throws regarding magic. Against magic, they get advantage on all of the mental saving throws. They have this gnome cunning. Their minds are harder to penetrate. Their languages are common and gnome. And then they have 2 subraces, the Forest Gnomes and the Rock Gnomes. So let us look at the Forest Gnome. First, dexterity score increases by 1. So that gives us our total of +3, +2 intelligence, +1 dexterity. Then we have this natural illusionist, giving them the bonus cantrip of minor illusion. Then we have speak with small animal, or speak with small beasts. And this is just all your small animals, squirrels, rabbits, ducks, that kind of stuff. And that's it. Those 3 things. +1 to dexterity, they gain a cantrip that they can cast, and they can speak with small animals. So let's look at the Rock Gnome. They're a little bit more complicated, the Rock Gnome, and we again have these 3 things. Their ability score increases to Constitution. +1 to Constitution, as well as the +2 to Intelligence. Then we have Artificer's Lore. Whenever you make an intelligence history check related to magic items, alchemical objects, or technological devices, you can add twice your proficiency bonus instead of any proficiency bonus you normally apply. Now this is somewhat awkward wording, but it's basically the same as Dwarven stone cutting. When they're making a history check, they get double their proficiency bonus as long as it is dealing with magical items, alchemical objects, or technical devices. Again, very limited in its use, just like stone cutting for the dwarf. Finally, we have Tinker. And this is one that is just odd to me. It does kind of fit the flavor of gnomes, but just a little odd, so let's get into this. What the Tinker here says is you have proficiency with artisan tools of tinkers. That's fine, we get a tool proficiency. Then it says this is where we get a little complicated. Using these tinker tools, you can spend 1 hour and 10 gold pieces to create a construct, which is a tiny clockwork device. And the device functions for 1 hour before it wears itself out, and you either have to spend another hour and to repair it, or you just dismantle it, reuse the parts to do something else. The thing that doesn't make sense to me is that it says you can only have 3 clockwork devices made at one time. I don't understand the logic behind this restriction of 3. But you have 3 options of what you can make. First, you have the Clockwork Toy, which is just, an animal, a monster, a person, whatever, a small little thing that you wind it up, put it on the ground, and it starts walking 5 feet per round. Okay. Then you have a fire starter. This allows you to produce a small spurt of fire that can light a candle, torch, or campfire, something like that. Somewhat useful. Then you have the music box, which just plays a tune. You open it up, it plays one song, says moderate volume, and it just plays it till the song's over or until the lid's closed. Now, exactly what function these things have in-game is going to be left up to the GM more than anything. I mean, the fire starter does state you can light certain small fires, What's the toy do? I can see it as a distraction. The music box, I'm not sure what you would do with that except just to kind of impress other people. So there's no real game mechanics that benefit you for having this Tinker thing, except the Tinker does give you proficiency with these tools, but the ability to make these clockwork devices just seems to be put in for flavor than any real game mechanics. But this is our Gnomes in 5th edition. And you'll note they have the gnome cunning gives them a bit of a, it's harder to manipulate their mind. And you have the Rock Gnomes Tinker and the Forest Gnomes can talk to animals. Let us go to 3rd edition. And we will note here, as I go through this, there are significant changes to the gnome between these 2 editions. More so than the dwarf, or the elf, or the human. Far more significant differences than any other race between these 2 editions. So let us look at the traits of a gnome in 3rd edition. First thing to note here, in 3rd edition, the gnome gets a +2 to Constitution, not to Intelligence. Constitution. And he gets a -2 to Strength. Describes them as being very tough, but because they are on the small side, you do not have as much physical strength as the medium or larger creatures. So they get a -2 to Strength, +2 to Constitution. Remember over here they got a +2 to Intelligence, and the Rock Gnome gets a +1 to Constitution, but the Forest Gnome +1 to Dexterity. So this +2 to Constitution it's not there really. The Rock Gnome kind of has it, but this is a complete change. Now, because they're both small, and as we've seen with other races, in 3rd edition they have a 20-foot speed. In 5th edition they have 25. That's just a standard change for races in 5th edition. But you'll note that a small race in 3rd edition gets a couple of good bonuses. Now, in 5th edition, a small race can't use certain weapons that are termed heavy. They're too big for a small person to use. But other than that, there's not much that your size really affects. I think it also affects your carrying capacity, how much you can carry on you, how much weight you can carry. But that's about it. In 3rd edition here, we get a bonus to armor class, to attack, and to hiding. A small creature, a small character, gets a bonus to their hide skill for being small. We'll see this also with the halfling, who is also a small race. We get these bonuses. Then the gnome has low light vision, like the elf did in 3rd edition, instead of dark vision, but it's still, just like the elf, this is how it translates, how low light vision would translate as dark vision in 5th edition. But now we get into some things that simply don't exist in 5th. They're just in 3rd. And we got these are just like the dwarf and elf had certain bonuses that don't translate to 5th edition. That's what a lot of these are. So we have weapon familiarity. There's something in 3rd edition called the gnome hooked hammer. That weapon doesn't exist in 5th, but in 3rd, a gnome treats it as a martial weapon instead of an exotic weapon, which again, as I mentioned with the dwarves, exotic weapons don't exist in 5th either. So this thing could not translate over because what it does simply doesn't exist. We then have this +2 racial bonus on saving throws against illusions. Now this was translated into 5th edition as getting advantage on intelligence, wisdom, and charisma saving throws, which is far more powerful than just saving throws against illusions. There are many effects in both editions that are not illusions, but in 5th edition would use one of these 3 saving throws. In 3rd edition, they'd all be the will save, but in 3rd edition, they only get a bonus against illusions. This is far more powerful in 5th. But it is kind of an attempt to translate the one over to the other. Then these guys get a +1 on the DC or difficulty class for all saving throws against illusions that they cast. So if a gnome casts illusion, then it's harder for other people to see through their illusions. It's easier for them to see through others' illusions, and it's harder for others to see through theirs. And we get this, the gnome is very much an illusionist race. in 3rd edition. We're seeing this here. We then have a +1 racial bonus on attacks against kobolds, and goblinoids. The dwarf had a +1 on his attacks against orcs and goblinoids. The gnomes have them against kobolds and goblinoids. And then they have a +4 dodge bonus against giant creatures. Creatures of the giant type, just like dwarves. He then gets a +2 racial bonus on listen checks, and a +2 racial bonus on crafting alchemy, which is a skill in 3rd edition. Again, these bonuses don't translate over to 5th edition because 5th edition doesn't have these kind of bonuses. In 5th edition, as I've said before, you get your proficiency bonus, and that's it. You don't get other modifiers. In 3rd edition, you frequently get other modifiers. That's what these are, and so they don't translate over. They do kind of try to do this with the gnome cunning having a bonus to the proficiency when doing history checks dealing with magic, alchemy, and technical devices. That's kind of an attempt to translate over this +2 to the alchemy skill into 5th edition. Again, that's actually is more limited in its use, but is somewhat more powerful than what 3rd edition has. And then languages. We have common and gnome over here. Common and gnome. And their list of bonus languages: Draconic, Dwarven, Elven, Giant, Goblin, and Orc. Again, 6, because every race gets a list of 6 bonus languages, except humans who have no restrictions. But then we get the biggest difference, the most significant difference between 3rd and 5th edition. In 3rd edition, a gnome gets spell-like abilities. Now, over here, the Forest Gnome gets the bonus cantrip of Minor Illusion. That's it. Only the Forest Gnome gets it, and it's just 1 cantrip. In 3rd edition, all gnomes cast Speak with Animals once per day. Well, your standard gnome gets this. You can cast Speak with Animals once per day, lasts for 1 minute, and it only affects burrowing mammals. But then it states this: a gnome with a charisma score of at least 10 also has the following spell-like abilities, which can be used once a day. We have Dancing Lights, Ghost Sound, and Prestidigitation. But they get these 3. In 5th, the Forest Gnome gets 1, and nobody else, the Rock Gnome gets none. See, in 3rd edition, the gnome is very much an illusionist race. They're known for their technical skill and their ability to manipulate the senses of others. They can create illusions. That's what the race is in 3rd edition. In 5th edition, they've altered the race so that they still have this, it's harder to affect their mind, but they have focused far more on the technical side. These are your scientists in 5th edition. In 3rd edition, they're your illusionist. In 5th edition, they're your scientist. And this is coming out of a lot of other games, I think. I'm seeing influence of games such as EverQuest, video games of that nature, where a lot of people have taken to making the gnome the scientific race of the fantasy world. In 3rd edition, they stick much more to the fantasy aspects of a gnome, making him an illusionist, which in most mythologies, that's what a gnome is. A gnome is an illusionist trickster in most mythological tales, in most actual fairy tales and myth. That's what he is. But he's become a scientist in modern fantasy. So 5th edition reflects this modern fantasy trope of scientific gnomes. We got the tinkers, we got all this. 3rd edition sticks much more to the illusionist trickster idea, which is also why the favorite class of the gnome is the bard. A spellcaster based in the charisma, the natural power of the individual, but somewhat, I wouldn't say focused on illusion, but in 3rd edition, the bard has more power, more enchantment and illusion spells than most any other kind of spell. And so it fits this illusionist trickster kind of persona of a gnome. Well, in 5th edition, they're going much more for the tinker scientist gnome. I think this is also why they turned the +2 A +2 to saves against illusions to advantage against all mental magic. Because they are the scientists. They're the smart ones, in a sense. They have the brain power that other races don't. And that's why I say this is the most significant differences between between races in 5th and 3rd edition. Now, I will point out that there's one thing here. In this little aside we have here, they mention the Snurfniblin as a 3rd subrace of gnome. They don't give you any game mechanics for it. They just mention it as gnomes that live deep underground. In 3rd edition, we just have this description of the gnomes. This is your basic standard gnome. But in the monster manual, they also give statistics or traits for the deep gnomes or Snurfniblins, as well as forest gnomes. And they state in the description that the Rock Gnome is the standard gnome of 3rd edition D&D. So in 3rd edition D&D, what you have as a standard gnome using the player's handbook is considered the Rock Gnome. And then you have the other subraces of Forest Gnome and Snurfniblin. Isn't that just a fun word? I gotta say it again, Snurfniblin. Anyways, so that's what it is. The Rock Gnome is the Illusionist. He has these spell-like abilities that he can have. That as long as he has a high enough charisma, he gets these as bonus spells. In 5th edition, the Rock Gnome is the Tinker, is the most scientific of the 2 subraces. The Forest Gnome gets a little bit of this Illusionist in him, and he can speak with animals like the Rock Gnome can in 3rd edition. And this even makes it more of a significant change. Because if the Forest Gnome was your standard gnome in 3rd edition, you could say that the Forest Gnome is somewhat similar with his minor illusion and speaking with animals and stuff. But it's not. It's the Rock Gnome. 5th edition, as I said. 5th edition, the gnome is your scientific race. In 3rd edition, he's an illusionist trickster. And that's my comparison of the gnome in between 5th and 3rd edition. I will leave it here. Half elf will be